Welcome to today. We are going to discuss a topic in Unit 4 in the paper PH 8251 Material Science. Today's topic is ferromagnetic materials and hysteresis. So, in our regular day-to-day life, we are all come across of so many types of magnetic materials, and we are familiar with different applications of these kind of materials. So, in this particular class, we are going to see some brief introduction about these different magnetic materials, and we are going to see a theory related to a class of magnetic material called ferromagnetic material, and we will discuss some of the important features of this corresponding materials. So let us start with the introduction. So a magnet is a material or an object that produces a magnetic field. This magnetic field is invisible, but it is the responsible for the most notable property of magnets. So this magnetic field is nothing but it's a kind of force that pulls on other magnetic materials or ferromagnetic materials such as iron, and it also do the process of attraction as well as repulsion. So we are all well aware about this magnetic property. So from our fundamental knowledge, we all know the magnet is having two important poles called North Pole and South Pole, and we feel that when two magnets are brought into vicinity, they may feel either attractive or repulsive force depending on the pole what we are bringing in. And these magnets are having the capability of attracting other kind of magnetic materials, and these magnetic materials are understood by different basic terms. Now let us see the basic terms we are using for explanation of magnetic property. Now let us start with a term called magnetic field. So a magnetic field is nothing but this is the space around the magnet where the magnetic effect will be experienced. So we can again define the space around the magnet where the unique north pole can experience a force. The magnetic field of a magnet can be represented by imaginary lines of force called magnetic field lines. So we are discussed in our lower classes large about these magnetic field lines. So these magnetic field lines will start from north and ends with south. So these magnetic field lines are the representation of strength of the magnet. If the density of the magnetic field lines are high, these materials will expose you very good magnetic nature. If a magnet seems to be weak, they will have only less amount of magnetic field lines. So the total number of magnetic field lines or force passing through a surface is known as magnetic flux. So it's normally represented by the symbol phi, and it is having the unit of Weber. And based on these magnetic flux lines, we are trying to define the another parameter called magnetic flux density, B. This is a vector quantity It is defined as the number of field lines of force passing through a normal surface at a particular point B. So we can simply define this magnetic flux density is nothing but this is the magnetic lines of force which is penetrating through a unit cross-sectional area, or we can say this is the number of field lines per unit area. Next important data or parameter we have to understand is the magnetic field intensity. It is also a vector, and it is representing a unit north pole experiencing a force when it is placed in a magnetic field. So this is it is a measure of magnetic force. Next important parameter is point is magnetic dipoles. So magnetic dipole is nothing but it is a two equal and opposite magnetic poles are separated by a small distance is considered to be a magnetic dipole. So if a pole is available in a single one, then it will be called as monopole. Such monopoles are not possible in the case of magnetic materials. So even you are breaking a magnet into much smaller and smaller pieces, each piece will have two poles which will be termed as north and south pole. So two equal and opposite poles separated by a small distance is called magnetic dipoles. So the next parameter is magnetic dipole moment. The magnetic dipole moment can be defined as the product of its pole strength and length of the magnet. It is represented by mu m. Here length is also understood as a distance between the two pole ends, and m is nothing but pole strength. If you are multiplying these two, this will gives you the term called magnetic dipole moment. So the magnetic dipoles and magnetic dipole moments are the very important parameters for defining a characteristics of a magnet. So depending on the available magnetic dipole moments and their orientation, the material's magnetic property will be understood. Next important topic is intensity of magnetization or magnetization. The term magnetization is the process of converting a non-magnetic material into a magnetic material. It measures the magnetization of magnetized specimen. So technically it will be defined as the magnetic moment induced per unit volume, that is also represented by the term I. It is equal to m by v. Here m is nothing but total number of magnetic dipole moments, and v is the volume. So total number of dipole moments per unit volume is called as intensity of magnetization or magnetization. Next, magnetic susceptibility. So this parameter will gives you the understanding of how much these materials are capable of accepting the supplied magnetic energy. Then it is also defined as it is the ratio between intensity of magnetization to magnetic field intensity I and H. Next is magnetic permeability. So this gives you the idea about how much a magnetic field can penetrate through the material. So it is defined as the ratio between magnetic flux density and magnetic field intensity H. So once one can calculate this magnetic permeability mu by using the two parameters B and H. Normally we will more focused on a parameter called relative permeability. A relative permeability is nothing but ratio between permeability of the medium to permeability of free space. This is called relative permeability mu r. So you can see the relation between relative permeability and magnetic susceptibility as mu r is equal to 1 plus psi m. Next important parameter is called retentivity and coercivity. So retentivity is nothing but this is a kind of magnetic field, magnetic energy which is stored in the magnetic material when it is demagnetized. So after the, we all know that when we place a magnetic non-magnetic material in an external magnetic field, it will be converted into magnet, and often we can able to observe that after removal of the external magnetic field, still the magnetic material will possess some amount of magnetic energy. So that amount of energy retained by the magnetic material during the process of magnetization is called retentivity or remanence. At the meantime, if you want to remove that stored magnetic energy, we need to spend external energy for removing that applied magnetic field, remove that available magnetic field by the applied magnetic field. That amount of external magnetic field required to remove the magnetic energy stored in the magnetic material is called coercivity, or it also called as coercive field. Now let us understand how this magnetic property is coming from. So one can understand that this magnetic property is a fundamental property which is arising from the atomic level. So we all know that any matter in this universe is made up of atoms. As a whole, it may present in a solid form or liquid form, in a gas form, but every system exists in this universe is made up of a fundamental unit called atoms. The property of magnetism exists by the certain material is associated with the magnetic property of its constituting atoms. So whatever the magnetic property exhibited by the material, that is going to be the associated property of the magnetic property of the individual atoms of that particular system. So theoretically, if you see microscopical way, there are three main contributions for magnetic property of the material by means of magnetic dipole moment. So the magnetic dipole moments of an atom will be contributed by three distinct phenomena called orbital motion of electrons, next spin motion of electron, and then nuclear spin of that particular atom. So the dipole moment which is contributed by orbital motion of the electron, that will be called as orbital magnetic moment. The spin motion of the electron which is contributing to the magnetic dipole moment is called spin magnetic moment, and electronic spin present in the nuclear which is the nuclear spin present in the nucleus which will contribute for the nuclear spin momentum. So the combination of these three will result you the required total magnetic moment of that particular atom. So now let us see one by one. Let us consider the orbital motion of the electron. So we all know that the atom is made up of nucleus and electron. The nucleus is at the center and electron is making the circular or orbital motion around the nucleus. So if we see the electron, the movement of electron generally called as current. So when we considering the movement of electron in an orbital, it can be imagined as a loop of current which is flowing through the closed loop. So the movement of electron will be considered as a current flow. So we all know that whenever the current is flowing through the conductor, in the direction perpendicular to the direction of flow of current, there will be a magnetic field will be generated. So the energy which is the magnetic energy or magnetic dipole which is contributed by this movement of electron in the orbital, which is called as orbital magnetic moment. So we are using a term called Bohr magneton to calculate the amount of magnetic moment contributed by a single electron. So that will be calculated by using the formula mu b is equal to EH by 4 pi m. Here E is the charge of the electron, H is the Planck's constant, m is the mass of the electron. For a single electron, this value is a constant value. And similar way, if we consider the spin magnetic moment, here we all know that electron is also making the self-rotatory motion, with either it by clockwise rotation or anti-clockwise rotation. So due to this rotatory motion, there will be a contribution of magnetic moment by the electron. And third one is the nuclear spin moment, by which the nuclear particles are making a spin, and from there also magnetic field will be generated. So as an atomic system, the magnetic moment of the atom will be contributed by these three distinct processes. In these three, the third category, nuclear spin moment, will contribute very less comparing to other two processes, so it can be neglected from the consideration. So in general, the magnetic property of the constituent element is being achieved by the two distinct motion of electron. One is by orbital motion, another one is by spin motion. So these two are the main contributor for the magnetic property of each and every atom. So in this consideration, all the atoms exist in the universe, they will have the magnetic property. That is what we have to understand fundamentally. But depending on the direction and orientation of orbital magnetic moment and spin magnetic moment and the net magnetic moment of an atom, there will be a compensation between the different oriented or random oriented atomic magnetic dipole. So as a result, if the net magnetic moment of the all the atoms in the material becomes zero, means the material will not show you magnetic property in the normal condition. But when a suitable magnetic field is applied, the nearly oriented atomic dipoles will orient in the direction of applied magnetic field. By the way, they will have the net magnetic moment. By this way they will started to expose you good magnetic property. This is how a magnetic and non-magnetic materials are responding to an external magnetic field. So based on their response to the external magnetic field and then the values of susceptibility, permeability, we are having a broad category of classification of a magnetic field. So each electronic orbit in an atom can be imagined as a tiny bar magnet, and this is called magnetic dipoles. Next. So based on our previous discussion, that is depending on the number of dipoles and their orientation, the value of susceptibility and permeability and their orientation in the absence of external magnetic field of dipoles, they are all the magnetic materials are classified into mainly 5 types. They are diamagnetic, paramagnetic, ferromagnetic, antiferromagnetic and ferrimagnetic material. So diamagnetic material is considered to be a non-magnetic material. They will not have any magnetic dipole moment in the absence of external magnetic field. So they will not have any net magnetic dipole moments due to the random orientation of all the dipoles. So, and when the external magnetic field is applied to this material, here the dipoles will align in the opposite direction to the applied magnetic field. By the way, they will not allow the material to get magnetized, and at the meantime they will not allowing any magnetic field lines to penetrate through it, and they will not accept any magnetic energy. So here the susceptibility value of the magnetic material, this diamagnetic material, becomes negative. So these are considered to be a diamagnetic materials which will repel or oppose the external magnetic field which is supplied to the material. Next category of material is called paramagnetic, where in the absence of external magnetic field all the dipole orientations are in random direction, but when there is a strong magnetic field is applied, there is a small proportion of dipoles will align in the direction of applied magnetic field. By the way, they will expose small amount of magnetic nature. So this kind of material will allow the magnetic field lines to penetrate through it, and they will accept very smaller amount of energy of magnet to become a magnetized material. So we can able to see very small magnetization effect in this kind of paramagnetic material. Next is a ferromagnetic material. So this is the material what we are really accepting as a good magnetic material, and we are using this material for our many applications. Iron comes under the class of these ferromagnetic materials. So these are the materials will have a large amount of parallel orientation of dipoles even in the absence of external magnetic field. So you can able to see spontaneous magnetization or automatic magnetization due to the parallel alignment of dipole arrangements, and when the magnetic field is applied, all the dipoles present in this magnetic material will get aligned in the direction of magnetic field. By the way, they will magnetize completely, and during the application of magnetic field lines, they will allow the magnetic field lines to penetrate through it completely, and they will ready to accept the supplied magnetic energy. Due to that property, they will have very high permeability value and very high positive susceptibility value. So this is a good magnetic material which is responding to the external magnetic field. And most importantly, the orientation of dipoles and their magnitudes are high, and they will be arranged in just same direction. The next is antiferromagnetic material. This is where you are able to have large number of dipoles which is aligned anti-parallel to each other in the absence of external magnetic field. They will not show you any magnetic property in the application without the application of external magnetic field. On the application of magnetic field from externally, they will show you a good magnetic, some amount of magnetization. Next category of yes, artificial or structured or for what is called dielectric ferromagnetic material. For dielectric magnetic material is called ferrimagnetic material. Here also you are able to see large value of susceptibility and permeability. The very important fact you have to understand here is, here also we have the anti-parallel arrangement of dipoles, but here the magnitudes of anti-parallel aligned dipoles will not have equal magnitude of magnetic dipole moment. So as a result, this will also show you good magnetic property considering to the other category of magnetic material. Now in this progress, let us discuss some important one of the important theory to understand the magnetization property of a ferromagnetic material. So let us discuss the ferromagnetism. The materials which exhibits spontaneous magnetization are called ferromagnetic material. So in certain materials like iron, cobalt, nickel and their alloys exhibit spontaneous magnetization, that is, they have small amount of magnetization even in the absence of an external magnetic field. This phenomena is known as ferromagnetism. So the phenomena of spontaneous magnetization even in the absence of external magnetic field is termed as ferromagnetism. So to understand this ferromagnetism, how this spontaneous magnetization is retained in the material can be explained on the basis of domain theory. So let us introduce domain. A domain, it is nothing but it is the group of atomic dipoles organized into tiny bounded regions in a ferromagnetic material. According to the domain theory, a specimen of ferromagnetic material consists of number of regions or domain which are spontaneously magnetized due to the parallel alignment and dipole. The direction of spontaneous magnetization varies from domain to domain, and the boundary separating the domain is. So you can able to see in the left, in the top diagram, you are able to see there are large number of regions are separated depending on the orientation of dipoles, and each region is called as domain, where you will have the orientation of dipoles are uniform. But when we cross the line, you can able to see different orientation of dipole. There is another domain which is having different orientation, but the region which is separating these two domains is called domain wall, where you will have the mixed orientation of dipole. So if the domain wall, the thickness of the domain boundary or domain wall is depends on the variation of orientation between the two dipole moments or dipoles. So if you have large variation in the orientation, you will have thick domain wall, and if you are having slight variation in the orientation, you will have the small domain wall. So to make all these dipoles to orient in the particular direction, we need to spend a energy. The amount of energy we need to spend, it's depending on the orientation. So depending on the orientation, the thickness of wall is going to be varied. If you have thin wall, it is required very smaller amount of energy. If you have very thick wall, we need to spend larger amount of energy to get all the dipoles to orient in the same direction, by the way, to make a complete magnetization. So the top diagram is a representation of orientations and domains in the absence of external magnetic field, which is having random orientation when we comparing domain to domain. But when the magnetic field is applied, depending on the strength of the external magnetic field, the orientations of the dipoles will get modified, and one high magnetic field situation we can able to achieve all the domains will have a same orientation of dipoles. By the way, you can able to see whole material as a single domain. So by the way, we can say that the materials are magnetized completely. So this is represented in the bottom image. So you can see able to first diagram, you can able to see the random orientation of dipoles without any when we are having very low magnetic field or with no magnetic field. When the magnetic field is increased, we are able to see the orientations of nearly oriented dipoles are get aligned in the same direction. By the way, the size of the domain will get increased by the process called domain wall movement. Further, if you are apply a very high magnetic field, by the way, all the domains will converted into a single oriented region. So during the rotation of domain, instead of turning individual dipoles in the direction of applied magnetic field, whole domain will be transferred to the direction of applied magnetic field. By the way, you can able to see total material is get oriented in the same direction. So when we achieve the saturated magnetic field, so you have achieved all the dipoles in the direction of applied magnetic field orientation. By the way, beyond that value, beyond the level of applied magnetic field, that is called saturation magnetic field, we may not able to achieve further magnetization by increasing the external magnetic field. So this is the magnetic field value where you are able to achieve the maximum magnetization out of this material, and that is called the saturation magnetic field. So at the point of saturation magnetic field, you will able to achieve the complete magnetization of the material. So we can able to see from the non-random oriented magnetic dipoles to completely parallel oriented domain, we are achieving by two processes called motion of domain walls, that are movement of domain walls. Second one is rotation of domain walls. So during the motion of domain walls, it is happen in low magnetic field. During this process, the individual dipoles present in the different domains will reoriented themselves in the direction of applied magnetic field. By the way, the size of the domains will get increased, the domain wall from shifting from their one point to another point for the growth of the region. The next process is happening at the high magnetic field, where whole domain will be applied and rotated in the direction of applied magnetic field when we apply a high magnetic field value. So in this, a situation called saturated magnetization will achieve at a very high magnetic field value. Beyond that value, we are not able to achieve further magnetization in the material. So in this ferromagnetic theory, a domain theory of ferromagnetism, there are four important energies which is involved in this whole magnetization process. They are exchange energy or magnetosection energy, and crystal anisotropic energy, domain wall energy, and magnetostrictive energy. So to outline these energies very simply, the exchange energy is the energy which is the responsible parameter for aligning nearby dipoles, and the influence of one dipoles will be affects the orientation of nearby dipoles. So this is the energy which is exchanged between the two nearby dipoles to make the dipoles orient in a parallel direction or parallel way in the same direction. So this is the energy which is exchanged between the two nearby dipoles to attain the required orientation. Next is the crystal anisotropic energy. We all know that when we consider the material as a crystal, the orientations are affecting their properties. So depending on the orientation or the direction of applied magnetic field to a material's orientation, depending on the phase we are applying, the material will get magnetized in different rate. So it is because different orientation crystals may have different distribution of atom. Some distribution of atom requires very less amount of energy to attain the magnetization. In some orientation of atoms, they may require higher amount of energy for achieving the magnetization. So it will result in variation of required magnetic field to attain a magnetization. So in crystalline system, the direction where we require very larger amount of magnetic energy to magnetize the material is called hard magnetization, hard direction, and the direction where we are requiring very low amount of energy to achieve the magnetization is called easy direction of magnetization. So in this crystal anisotropic energy is nothing but this is the energy difference between the so-called energy required for easy direction and hard direction. You can able to see the diagram is representing the magnetization curve for a ferromagnetic material. You can able to see in the direction of 100. So for the application of small magnetic field, you can able to see high magnetization. For the direction of 111, for the application of small same amount of magnetic field, you are achieving low magnetization. So the energy difference between these two directions is considered to be the crystal anisotropic energy. So thus the energy required to magnetize the material to be found the function of crystal orientation. Next is the domain wall energy. So a domain wall is a boundary between two domains whose overall magnetic moments are at different orientations. This is the reason for large width of the domain wall is due to the balance between the two forces, the exchange and magnetocrystalline anisotropic energy. And here the domain change orientation gradually with the domain boundary being 300 atom wide. Figure shows the schematic drawing which takes place gradually across the boundary. So we all know that if we take two domains, one is having orientation of one particular direction, another domain is having the orientation in another direction. When we analyze the orientation change from one end to another end, from the boundary from one domain to another boundary of the another domain, we can able to see the orientation change is happening gradually, not at an abrupt way. So the energy which is related to this domain wall energy is called domain wall energy. To achieve the magnetization, we need to overcome this domain wall energy. Next is the magnetostrictive energy. So this is the energy which is understood in the case of in such materials where you are observing the dimension change. So in ferromagnetic materials, when it is get magnetized, it is dimension changes slightly happen and the sample be magnetized either expand or contrast in a direction of magnetization. So this effect is called magnetostrictive energy, magnetostrictive effect, and the energy involved is called magnetostrictive energy. So this magnetically induced reversible elastic strain is called magnetostriction, and the lattice strain energy associated with this magnetostriction is known as magnetostrictive energy. So these four are the fundamental energies which will resides the amount of magnetization. If you take the exchange energy, so this is the energy which is nearly contributing for the rate of magnetization, and the direction of applied magnetic field will be understood in the case of crystalline materials, and then this the domain wall energy is the type of consideration we have to understand based on the thickness of the domain. The amount of energy spent for the production of magnetization is going to be varied, and finally the magnetostrictive energy is a kind of energy which is lost due to this magnetostriction effect, and these four energies should be considered properly to achieve the proper magnetization in a particular material. So this is a theory to understand the ferromagnetic property of the magnetic material. One thing we have to understand here, when the material is magnetized from lower value to higher value, there will be the increase of magnetization amount up to the attainment of saturation magnetic field. Once the material is reached the saturation magnetic field, or after amount of magnetization is achieved, if we remove the applied magnetic field, the dipoles which is reoriented according to the applied magnetic field will not return to its original orientation at a jiffy. So it will take some more amount of time to return to its original direction in the absence of external magnetic field. So during this reorientation timing, the material can expose the magnetic property due to their larger amount of dipoles are orienting in a same direction. So by the way, you are able to see a spontaneous magnetization in the case of ferromagnetic materials. So by this way we can understand the ferromagnetism of a ferromagnetic material. Next important topic on this ferromagnetic material is ferromagnetic hysteresis. So from this you can understand the ferromagnetism much elaborately. So when a ferromagnetic material is taken through a cycle of magnetization, the variation of magnetic induction with respect to the applied field is represented by a closed curve. This closed curve is called hysteresis loop or hysteresis curve. Here the hysteresis is nothing but it is a definition defined as the lagging of magnetic induction behind the intensity of magnetic field in a ferromagnetic material. The diagram represented here is a typical example of a hysteresis curve. A hysteresis curve actually it represents the cycle of magnetization and demagnetization process of a magnetic material. So this hysteresis curve can be obtained by plotting the values of magnetic induction V with respect to applied magnetic field in a ferromagnetic material. So to plot this hysteresis curve, we have to take magnetic field intensity H in the x-axis and magnetic induction B in the y-axis. So as I reminding you, this is the representation of variation of magnetic induction with respect to applied external magnetic field intensity H. So let us start in the point O, where both H and B are 0, that is magnetic field intensity and magnetic inductions are 0. As the magnetic field intensity value is increased slowly, at the same rate the magnetic flux density also get increased. So there will be a linearity between B and H. At a particular point, you can able to see in the curve the linearity between the B and H becomes slightly altered, and when we reach the point A for the magnetic field intensity value of G, the magnetic induction value reaches the maximum. Beyond this particular magnetic field intensity value, further increase of H will not result any increase of the value of B, that is magnetic induction. So this is the situation that where we are achieved the complete magnetization in the material, and this is the magnetic field externally applied where you are achieving the complete magnetization is called saturated magnetic field intensity. So at the beyond the saturated magnetic field intensity, that will not result you any increase of magnetization in the material. So now we can say that during the path O to A, the material is completely magnetized. Now let us start the demagnetization process. It is nothing but application of magnetic field intensity in the opposite direction. Now we are reducing the magnetic field intensity in the opposite direction. What we are observing from the curve from A to B, the reduction of magnetic induction will not have the same rate as that of magnetic field intensity H. We can observe from the diagram, when the H value reaches 0, the B value, the capital B value, that is magnetic induction, will not reach 0. They will be still having some value which is represented in the point B. So this is the amount of energy which is stored in the magnetic material, and this particular value from O to B will be called as residual magnetic field or retentivity. To make this material completely demagnetized, now we need to apply the magnetic field intensity in the negative direction. Now when we apply the magnetic field intensity to the negative direction at the point C, B value becomes 0, but H value is not 0. So this amount of energy between O to C spent in H, it is called as coercive field. This is the amount of energy we need to spend the material's demagnetization process. So further, if you are increasing the magnetic field intensity in the negative x-axis, again the material will start to get magnetized along this direction, and it will reach as a saturation magnetic field at D. At this particular point, again material reaches the saturated magnetic field, but in the opposite directions. Further, if you are continuing the increase of magnetic field in the minus x direction, that will not result you any further increase of magnetic induction. Now we can say again the material is completely demagnetized, but now again when we try to demagnetize the material, now again H value reaches to O, that is 0. Still the magnetic induction will reach the point E only. Still you are having some amount of energy stored in the material, and again to demagnetize it, and you need to spend the magnetic field in the opposite direction from O to F. Then only the material is completely demagnetized and B value becomes 0. Further, if you are increasing the magnetic field intensity value further up to G, now you can reach the point A, and same cycle will keep on continuing when we are doing this process of magnetization and demagnetization continuously. So this complete cycle of magnetization demagnetization is represented by this curve, and this curve is called hysteresis curve. So at the point B and point C and point E and point F, what we are observing is the magnetic induction is lagging behind the magnetic field intensity applied externally, and this is represented as hysteresis. And the area inside the closed loop is always representing the energy loss due to the magnetization process in the material. So this is how ferromagnetic materials hysteresis nature can be understood. So this is in this curve, the amount of B that is represented by OB is the measure of the amount of energy stored in the magnetization process by the material, and due to this value of magnetization present in the material will spontaneously exposing the magnetic property, right? And the product between OC and OB is called as BH product. So we can understand this hysteresis curve of this ferromagnetic material based on the domain theory of ferromagnetism. So in this magnetization curve of a hysteresis curve, so you can divide this into 3 regions. First one is called reversible wall displacement, second one is irreversible wall displacement, and third one is rotation of domains. So during the application of small magnetic field intensity, the dipoles are orienting slightly with respect to the applied magnetic field, and small amount of dipoles are oriented in the direction of applied magnetic field. Then there will be a small increase in the domain. At this point, if you are removing the applied magnetic field, that reoriented domains will return to the original magnetic field direction quickly. So you can able to see the sudden loss of magnetization. But further, if you are increasing the applied magnetic field, the shifted domain walls are going for larger distance. So by the way, they will require larger amount of time to return to its original orientation. So that is the region where you are seeing the irreversible wall displacement. So further, if you are applying very high magnetic field, so you will enter into the situation of domain rotation, where you are having all the dipoles are oriented in the direction of applied magnetic field, so there will be a larger magnetization is achieved. So when we achieve the maximum magnetization at that particular point, if you are removing the applied magnetic field to zero suddenly, the dipoles which is already reoriented completely will not come to its original orientation at the beginning to represent zero in a larger time. So they will not come suddenly to the original directions, and they will take much more amount of time for reorienting themselves for the original orientation. So that is what represented during the curve C and D. So in this pictorial representation, you are having so many stepwise pictorial representation. Actually, these contours represented in these pictures are is a representation of atomic dipoles. So you can able to see in the top diagram and the bottom diagram there is a the parallel lines of dipoles that represents the complete magnetization of the material. So based on this hysteresis curve, we can classify the magnetic material into two groups. One is soft magnetic material, another one is hard magnetic materials. So soft magnetic materials these are the magnetic material which can be easily magnetized and demagnetized, and they have high permeability and low coercivity, and the energy stored in it is not high, and low hysteresis losses due to the small hysteresis loop. And the hysteresis curve for these kind of soft magnetic materials are represented in the bottom diagram. So the example is carbon steel is a good example for soft magnetic materials. So in the case of soft magnetic materials, we can magnetize them or demagnetize them easily, and they will have very low amount of hysteresis loss, and smaller magnetic energy can be stored, and they can have high permeability value, and they will show you low coercive force. So they will require very smaller amount of magnetic field and energy to destroy their magnetic property. But in the case of hard magnetic material, they have very broad size of hysteresis loop. They will not be get magnetized or demagnetized that much easily. They will have low permeability and high coercive force to remove the magnetic field energy, and these materials are capable of storing high magnetic energy, and their hysteresis loss is very large due to their large area in the hysteresis loop. So this is the classification of soft magnetic material and hard magnetic material. So these two materials are find different applications in different situations depending on the nature of their magnetization and demagnetization process. Thank you.